The raindrops tapped softly against the window pane. I stood in the kitchen, the chef's knife in my hand falling in a steady rhythm on the cutting board, slicing a bright green cucumber into perfectly even strips. The low hum of the range hood couldn't quite drown out the sounds of laughter coming from the living room. I quietly glanced up, and through the glass door of the kitchen, I could see my son, Robert, with his arm around his wife, Nicole, sitting on the sofa watching television. My 8-year-old grandson, Leo, was sprawled out on the rug, engrossed in his tablet. The flickering light from the screen danced on their faces, painting a picture of domestic bliss, while I felt like an invisible person, quarantined from this warm scene. "Mom, is dinner ready yet?" "Leo's starving." Nicole's voice drifted in from the living room, a clear note of impatience in her tone. Almost. Just have to sauté the green beans and we'll be ready," I called back quickly, wiping my hands on my apron before turning to light the stove. As the oil heated in the pan, I tossed in a handful of minced garlic. It hit the pan with a sharp sizzle, and the fragrant aroma instantly filled the air. My lower back ached with a dull, persistent pain. I had been on my feet since morning, first cleaning the entire house, then going out for groceries, and returning only to start cooking dinner without a moment's rest. For the past 10 years, my days had followed this same relentless cycle. I was 68 years old now, and my body was not what it used to be. "Grandma, I want chicken nuggets." Leo suddenly burst into the kitchen, his eyes still glued to the tablet in his hands. "Grandma bought some beautiful fresh fish today. I made that baked cod you love," I said in a soft voice. "I don't want fish. I want nuggets," Leo pouted, his fingers swiping furiously across the screen. Nicole walked in at the sound of his voice, her brow furrowed. "Mom, if the kid wants chicken nuggets, why don't you just make them for him? Why do you always have to do things your way?" I opened my mouth, wanting to explain that the chicken at the supermarket hadn't looked fresh, and besides, it was too late to start making them now. But in the end, I just nodded. "Okay, I'll be sure to make them tomorrow." Dinner was finally on the table, 4 dishes and a soup, all steaming hot. I carefully served everyone their portions of rice before finally sitting down myself. "This is way too salty," Nicole said, after taking a single bite of green beans, her frown deepening. "Oh, I'll be more careful next time," I said quickly, though I distinctly remembered her complaining last week that my cooking was too bland, which is why I had intentionally added an extra pinch of salt. Robert ate without a word, offering no comment on my cooking, good or bad. Leo was completely absorbed in his phone. I had to gently remind him, "Leo, it's time to eat. Your food is getting cold." "Just leave him. He'll eat when he's hungry," Nicole cut me off, then turned to Robert. "The HOA fee went up again. It's an extra $200 this month." I hesitated for a moment before speaking up. "Robert, I've been feeling dizzy these last few days. I was thinking." "Mom, why do you have to bring that up at the dinner table?" Robert said without looking up from his plate. "Leo, stop playing with your phone and eat." I swallowed the rest of my sentence and lowered my head, pushing the rice around in my bowl. It felt like something was caught in my throat, and I couldn't get a single bite down. After dinner, I cleared the dishes, cleaned the kitchen, and mopped the floor. By the time I was done with everything, it was nearly 10 o'clock at night. I tiptoed back to my room, which was really just a converted storage closet, just big enough for a single bed and a small dresser. Closing the door behind me, I let out a long sigh and reached under the bed for a small notebook. In the dim light of my bedside lamp, I began to record my expenses. March 5th, groceries $56.28, green beans 8, cucumber 5, tofu 4, miscellaneous 11. Water and power bill $143. New pencil case for Leo, $25. Flipping through the pages, I saw that this little notebook held a record of every single penny I had spent in this house for the last 10 years. Ever since my husband passed away and Robert brought me here to enjoy my golden years, I had poured every cent of my small pension and life savings into this family. I never kept score, never held it against them. Being able to do something for my son's family gave me a sense of peace. But tonight, as my fingers traced over the dense columns of numbers, a wave of profound sadness washed over me. In 10 years, I had never bought myself a single new piece of clothing, never eaten a meal out, and never even dared to get sick. for fear of being a burden. Outside, the rain began to fall harder, each drop a drumbeat against my heavy heart. I touched my forehead. It was burning up. It seemed I had really caught a cold. Tomorrow, I thought. I have to tell Robert tomorrow. I need to rest for a couple of days. I closed the ledger, and a question I had never considered before suddenly surfaced in my mind. What would I do if, one day, I truly couldn't do this anymore? At 5 o'clock in the morning, long before the sun was up, my head was pounding as if it were about to split open. My throat was on fire, and every swallow felt like swallowing knives. I felt my forehead. The searing heat of my own skin startled me. I have to get up and make breakfast, I mumbled to myself, forcing my body out of bed. The storage room had no windows, so it was impossible to tell night from day, but my internal clock was more reliable than any alarm. The moment I stood up, a wave of dizziness washed over me, and I had to grab the wall to keep from falling. After a few deep breaths, I slowly shuffled to the door and opened it as quietly as possible, terrified of waking them. The light in the kitchen felt painfully bright to my eyes. I began to move on autopilot, rinsing rice to make oatmeal, taking eggs and pickles out of the refrigerator. My hands moved from a decade of muscle memory, but my mind was a fog, and my vision kept blacking out for a second at a time. "Mom, how come there are no pancakes today?" Robert asked, yawning as he walked into the kitchen, still in his pajamas. "I'm not feeling very well today, so I just made oatmeal." My voice was so hoarse it was barely a whisper. Robert frowned. "You know Nicole doesn't like oatmeal." I opened my mouth to explain, but was overcome by a violent coughing fit and had to brace myself against the stove to stay upright. All right, I'll just go pick up some donuts," Robert said, waving his hand dismissively. "Just tidy up the living room. Nicole has a coworker coming over today." I nodded, and fighting through the discomfort, I started picking up the clothes, snack bags, and toys they had carelessly left scattered around the previous night. Every time I bent over, the pain in my head intensified, and stars exploded in my vision. I had just finished mopping the floor when Nicole walked in, laughing and chatting with 2 female colleagues. I quickly ducked into the kitchen, not wanting to embarrass her in front of her friends. "Ma'am, could you get us some water?" Nicole's voice called from the living room. With trembling hands, I poured 3 glasses of water. Just as I was about to carry them out, another coughing fit nearly made me drop the tray. By the time I finally composed myself and brought the water to the living room, Nicole and her friends had already helped themselves to sodas from the refrigerator. "Just put them there," Nicole said, glancing at the glasses in my hand with a cold, indifferent tone. I silently set the glasses down and turned to go back to the kitchen, but Nicole's voice stopped me. "What kind of mopping job is this? There's still a smudge right here." I looked down and saw that there was indeed a small, dirty spot on the floor that I must have missed when I was coughing. "I'm so sorry. I'll get it right now." "Ma'am, you don't look very well," one of Nicole's colleagues said with a note of concern. "It's nothing. Just a little cold," I managed a weak smile. "Stop putting on an act," Nicole scoffed. "You were fine yesterday. How convenient that you suddenly get sick today." My eyes instantly filled with tears, but I fought them back, refusing to let them fall. I turned and went to the bathroom to get the mop to clean the spot again. Just as I reached the smudge, the world began to spin. I couldn't hold myself up any longer and collapsed heavily onto the floor. The mop clattered beside me, and the bucket tipped over, spilling water everywhere. "Oh my God, my new skirt," Nicole shrieked. I struggled to get up, but I had no strength. Through my blurry vision, I saw Nicole standing there, furious, while her colleagues looked on, completely mortified. "Mom, what are you doing?" Robert yelled, rushing over at the sound of the commotion. When he saw the mess, his face darkened instantly. I just slipped," I managed to say, struggling to prop myself up. I realized my right wrist was throbbing with a sharp pain. I must have sprained it when I fell. Nicole picked up the mop and threw it down in front of me. "Stop faking it. Can't you see the floor is dirty?" I froze, unable to believe what I had just heard. I looked up at my son, pleading with my eyes for him to say something, to defend me. But Robert just looked at me coldly and said, "Mom, don't play the victim. You live here for free. Is it too much to ask for you to do a little work?" His words were a dagger straight through my heart. 10 years of tireless work, 10 years of scrimping and saving, and all it earned me were the words "live here for free." I took a deep breath and, using every ounce of strength I had, I pulled myself to my feet. "I'll clean it up," I said calmly. I picked up the mop and began to wipe the floor, inch by inch. Silent tears streamed down my face, mixing with the spilled water on the floorboards, and vanished without a trace. Nicole's colleagues quickly made their excuses and left. For the rest of the afternoon, I moved like a robot, finishing all the housework before quietly retreating to my little storage room. As soon as the door was closed, I finally allowed myself to cry. It wasn't a loud, wailing cry, but a suppressed, silent weeping, terrified that they might hear me. When the tears finally stopped, I wiped my face and looked around the room I had lived in for 10 years. The walls were covered in stickers my grandson had discarded. The bed was made with old, hand-me-down sheets, and in the corner was a small pile of my clothes, all things Nicole no longer wore. A decision began to form in my mind, growing clearer and stronger with each passing moment. I waited and waited, until late into the night, certain they were both sound asleep. Then, I began to move, quiet as a mouse. My luggage was pathetically simple. A few changes of clothes, a photograph of my late husband, my driver's license, and an old bank passbook, and the ledger that chronicled my 10 years of expenses. It all fit into an old tote bag with plenty of room to spare. I took one last look at the home that had been my prison and left a note on the dining room table. "I've gone back to the old farm. Don't worry about me." As I walked out of the suburban development, the pre-dawn wind felt cool against my feverish face. For the first time in 10 years, I felt a sense of release, a profound lightness, even though my body ached and I felt terribly ill. I got on the first regional bus of the day, and as I watched the scenery outside the window slowly transform from towering apartment buildings to open fields and quiet towns, my thoughts drifted back 10 years. My husband had just passed away, and Robert, with tears in his eyes, had said, "Mom, come live with us in the city. Let us take care of you." How moved I had been then, believing my son truly cared for me. I never imagined that this so-called care was just a new form of servitude as their unpaid maid. The rocking of the bus lulled me into a deep sleep, and I dreamt of all the little moments from the past decade. Nicole's disdain after she married into the family, the exhausting days and nights I spent caring for Leo after he was born, the times I pushed through sickness to get the housework done. Last stop, the driver's shout woke me with a jolt. I grabbed my bag and stepped off the bus, standing at the entrance to a village that was both familiar and strange. 10 years had passed, and the village had changed a lot, but the small dirt road leading to the old family house was still there. The house itself was even more dilapidated than I had imagined. A corner of the yard's stone wall had collapsed, the paint on the front door was peeling away, and the yard was overrun with weeds that came nearly up to my knees. With a trembling hand, I took out the key I had kept safe for 10 years and inserted it into the lock. But it wouldn't turn. A decade of wind and rain had rusted the lock solid. Left with no other choice, I walked around to the back of the house and stepped through the gap in the collapsed wall. The old apple tree was still standing, its trunk thicker and more gnarled than I remembered. A few withered apples still clung to its branches, swaying precariously in the wind. The back door was unlocked. It creaked open with a groan that set my teeth on edge. A musty smell hit me, and I couldn't help but cough, the sound echoing eerily in the silent house. Sunlight streamed through the grimy windows, illuminating columns of dancing dust. A thick layer of gray covered every piece of furniture, and cobwebs draped the corners of the room. My eyes swept over every detail, and memories flooded back. This was where my husband and I had lived for over 30 years. In that corner was his old armchair, where he loved to sit and read. By the window was my sewing machine, where I had made clothes for Robert and mended his socks. On the wall still hung our black and white wedding photograph, now so faded that our faces were barely visible. "Helen, is that you?" A frail voice called from behind me, startling me so much I nearly jumped. I turned to see an old man with a shock of white hair standing at the gate, squinting to see inside. "Doc? Doc Peterson?" I asked, hesitantly recognizing my old neighbor. "It really is you," Doc Peterson exclaimed, walking briskly toward me with his cane. I heard someone was heading this way this morning, and I had a feeling it might be you. Doc Peterson was about 10 years older than me, the only doctor in the village for miles. My husband used to see him often. A decade had passed, and his back was more stooped, but his eyes were still sharp. "What brings you back all of a sudden? And where's Robert? Didn't he come with you?" he asked with genuine concern. I forced a smile. I just wanted to come back and see the old place." Doc Peterson was a wise man. He could see that something was wrong, but he was kind enough not to press the issue. "Well, this place hasn't been lived in for a long time. It's going to need a lot of work. I'll have my boy come over and give you a hand with the repairs." "Oh no, you don't have to trouble yourselves." "It's no trouble at all," he said, waving his hand. "You did more than enough for our family back in the day. It's our turn to help you." My nose tingled, and I felt the tears welling up again. In the city, after 10 years of service, my own son and daughter-in-law saw me as a burden. But back here, in my old village, my neighbors still remembered the kindnesses of the past. Without another word, Doc Peterson insisted I come to his house for dinner. As we walked down the village road, many of the locals stared at me curiously. Some of the older ones recognized me and waved, but most were younger people who looked at this old woman from the city with unfamiliar eyes. Doc Peterson's house was just as I remembered it, simple but impeccably clean. His wife had passed away long ago, and he now lived with his son and his family. His daughter-in-law warmly served me a steaming bowl of chicken noodle soup, and it was only then that I realized I hadn't eaten all day. As I was eating, the phone in my pocket suddenly rang. It was Robert. I hesitated for a moment, then stepped outside into the yard to answer. "Mom, where did you run off to?" Robert's voice was sharp with anger. "Nicole is furious. She said you did this on purpose to embarrass her." I took a deep breath. "I'm back at the old house." "Are you crazy? Get back here right now. There's a million things to do." "I'm not coming back." My voice was calm, so calm it surprised even me. "I want to live my own life." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, followed by a cold, bitter laugh. "Fine, have it your way, but don't come crawling back to us when you can't make it." He hung up. I stood in the yard, the hand holding the phone trembling slightly. This wasn't the first time my son and I had argued, but it was the first time I had ever stood up to him. "You all right?" Doc Peterson asked, walking over and handing me a cup of hot tea. I shook my head and managed a weak smile. "I'm fine." Back at the old house, I began the long process of cleaning. True to his word, Doc Peterson's son came over with a toolbox to help fix the broken lock and get the water and electricity running again. By evening, the house was finally in a livable condition. I thanked them and insisted on paying them for their time, then continued to work alone. Wiping down furniture, sweeping away dust, changing the old linens. It was a lot of work, but I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I was working for myself now, in my own home. While cleaning the kitchen, I found a dusty wooden box tucked away in the back of a cabinet. I opened it to find my old tools for making homemade jams and sauces, a stone mortar and pestle, wooden spoons, cheesecloth, and a small yellowed notebook filled with recipes for all kinds of preserves. The memories came flooding back. When I was younger, my homemade sauces were famous in the village. People would come from all over to buy them. But after Robert went to college in the city and expenses grew, my husband and I had to focus on farming, and I never had time for it again. I gently traced the patterns on the old stone mortar. An idea began to take shape in my mind. That night, lying in bed in my own house, the mattress was hard and lumpy, but it felt 100 times more comfortable than the storage room at my son's house. Moonlight streamed through the window, and as I stared at the ceiling, I began to plan my future. I still had a little bit of savings, and with my monthly pension, I could manage if I was careful. The old house was run down, but with some repairs, it was perfectly fine to live in. The yard was overgrown, but I could clear it out and plant a vegetable garden. And most importantly, I had found that box of tools. Maybe, just maybe, I could revive my old craft. The next morning, I went to the town hall. The young man at the desk, the town clerk, was very helpful. When he heard I was planning to stay for good, he eagerly told me about the new local programs. The state is encouraging rural revitalization, he explained. For returning seniors like you, there are small business loans and startup grants available. He handed me a few brochures. Do you have any plans? I was thinking of making and selling some homemade sauces, I said, feeling a little embarrassed. That's a fantastic idea. The clerk's eyes lit up. People in the city love that kind of stuff. Artisanal, all-natural foods. If you make a good product, we can help you find places to sell it. I left the town hall feeling much lighter. On my way back, I stopped at the general store and bought some basic ingredients, and then I went to the edge of the woods to forage for some wild herbs. Back home, following the recipes from my memory, I started with a simple chili sauce. My hands were a little clumsy at first, but the basic skills were still there. As I crushed the peppers, the spicy aroma filled the air, making me cough, but it also filled me with a sense of vitality I hadn't felt in years. By evening, the first batch was ready. I filled a few small jars, planning to give them to Doc Peterson and a few other old neighbors to try. I had just stepped out the door when I saw a familiar car parked at my gate. My heart sank. It was Robert's family. Grandma. Leo was the first one out of the car, running toward me. I instinctively opened my arms to catch him, a mix of complicated emotions swirling inside me. The boy was innocent. In all these years, he was the one thing I couldn't bear to let go of. Mom, what is all this? Robert asked as he walked over. His tone was softer than it had been on the phone, but his face was still clouded with displeasure. Nicole followed slowly behind, her high heels sinking into the dirt path, a look of utter disgust on her face. You can actually live in a place like this? I held Leo and didn't say a word. Robert looked around, his eyes landing on the chili peppers drying in the yard and the freshly made jars of sauce in the kitchen. His frown deepened. Are you really planning to stay here for good? He asked. I nodded. Yes. The house just needs a little work. Don't be ridiculous, Mom, Robert sighed. Come back with us. Nicole said she's willing to forget what happened yesterday, as long as you promise to be more diligent in the future. I almost laughed out loud. In his eyes, I was just throwing a tantrum, and the condition for my return was to work harder. I'm not going back, I said calmly, setting Leo down. I'm happy here. Happy? What's there to be happy about? Robert's voice suddenly rose. Do you have any idea what people in the village are saying? They're saying that I, Robert, am an ungrateful son who kicked his own mother out. So that was it. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about his reputation. Leo curiously picked up a jar of chili sauce. Grandma, what's this? It's chili sauce that Grandma made. Do you want to try some? I crouched down, opened the lid, and put a tiny bit on a chopstick for him. Leo licked it cautiously, and his eyes lit up. Yummy? It's way better than the stuff from the store. Is it really? Nicole walked over suspiciously and tried a little herself. Her expression was one of surprise. It's actually not bad. Mom, what have you decided? Robert interrupted impatiently. Are you going to give up a comfortable life in the city to suffer in this backwater town? Robert, I said, looking my son directly in the eye. For those 10 years in the city, I wasn't living. I was surviving. Not living? Did we starve you? Did we not give you clothes to wear? Robert's voice rose again. Do you have any idea how much it costs to hire a live-in nanny these days? And you just up and leave. That one sentence laid his true feelings bare. In his eyes, I was nothing more than a free nanny. Grandma, don't go, Leo suddenly cried, hugging my leg. My heart softened. I knelt down and wiped away his tears. Sweetheart, Grandma's not leaving. Grandma is home now. Whenever you miss me, you can always come and visit. That's enough, Nicole said, pulling Leo away. Let her stay where she wants. Robert, let's go. We're wasting our time here. Robert stood there for a moment, his face grim. Finally, he threw out one last sentence. Don't say I didn't warn you. He turned and walked back to the car. As I watched the car drive away, kicking up a cloud of dust, I stood motionless for a long time, until Doc Peterson's voice brought me back to reality. Helen, are you okay? He asked, his eyes full of worry. I shook my head and forced a smile. I'm fine. In fact, I just made some chili sauce. Here, try some. Doc Peterson took the jar and tasted a spoonful. "Wow," he said, amazed. "I haven't tasted anything this good in decades. You still remember how to make it?" "I'm a little out of practice," I said modestly. In the following days, I busied myself with repairing the old house and clearing the yard, all while experimenting with different sauce recipes. Doc Peterson came by often, sometimes with vegetables from his garden, other times just to sit and chat. His grandson, who was studying food science in college, helped me research modern food safety standards. After the first batch of sauces was distributed among the villagers, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Many people asked if I was selling it and said they would gladly pay. "Helen, it's a crime not to sell this," the town clerk said after tasting it. "There's a farmer's market in town next week. How about I get you a booth?" I hesitated. "It's just me. I can't make very much." "Just give it a try," the clerk encouraged. City folks go crazy for this kind of authentic, handmade stuff. They'll pay a premium for it. With the encouragement of Doc Peterson and the town clerk, I decided to give the market a shot. For the next few days, I worked from dawn till dusk, preparing my inventory. I made chili sauce, mushroom sauce, and a special wild herb sauce. I carefully packaged each one and attached a handwritten label. On the day of the market, I was so nervous I could barely speak. My booth was simple, just a table with a few rows of sauce jars and a small plate for samples. At first, no one stopped. I stood there awkwardly until Doc Peterson arrived with a few old neighbors to show their support. Gradually, people started to gather. "This chili sauce has such a pure flavor," a middle-aged woman exclaimed after trying a sample. "How much for a jar?" $15, I whispered, afraid I was asking too much. "That's a steal." "I'll take 3, she said, promptly pulling out her wallet. Slowly but surely, a crowd formed around my booth, a mix of curious young people and older folks nostalgic for traditional flavors. By noon, all 50 jars I had brought were sold out. "Ma'am, will you be here again tomorrow?" "I'd love to buy some more as gifts," a young woman asked, disappointed. Yes, I'll be back," I said, my voice trembling with excitement. "I'll bring more tomorrow." On the way home, I counted the day's earnings, my hands shaking. $750. After subtracting the cost of ingredients, I had made a profit of nearly $500. To someone from the city, that might not seem like much, but for me, it was the first money I had earned through my own labor in 10 years. That evening, I treated myself by cooking 2 of my favorite dishes and opened a bottle of beer to celebrate. I had just sat down when my phone rang. It was Robert. "Mom, I heard you were selling stuff at the market." His tone was strange. "Yes, I just made a few jars of sauce to see how it would go," I said quietly. "A friend of Nicole's was there today. She said you had a long line." Robert paused. "How much did you make?" I hesitated, then told him the truth. $500? In one day? Robert's voice shot up. "You should make more." "It's just me. I can't keep up." "Then hire people. There are plenty of folks in the village looking for work," Robert said excitedly. "Look, I'll bring Nicole down this weekend. We can sit down and make a real plan." "Robert," I interrupted him, "this is just a small hobby, something to earn a little pocket money." "Mom, you don't understand?" Robert started to argue, but I politely cut him off. After hanging up, I let out a long sigh. Robert's sudden enthusiasm wasn't for me, it was for the money. He didn't really care about my well-being at all. The next day, I brought 80 jars of sauce to the market, and once again, sold out completely. The day after that, I hired 2 women from the village to help me wash jars and prepare ingredients. My production increased to 150 jars a day. A week later, as I was busy bottling sauce in my yard, the familiar car pulled up to my gate once more. This time, Robert, Nicole, and Leo were all dressed in casual clothes, looking as if they planned to stay a while. "Grandma," Leo ran over excitedly. "Dad said we're staying here for the weekend." I wiped my hands and went to greet them, though I had a good idea what this was about. Sure enough, Robert got straight to the point. "Mom, Nicole and I have talked it over. This sauce business of yours has real potential. We want to invest and help you expand." Nicole, for the first time, had a smile on her face. "That's right. Robert knows the head buyer for the county supermarket chain. We can get your sauce on their shelves. I looked at them, then at the two village women helping me in the yard, and said calmly, "No, thank you. I'm perfectly happy with the way things are now." "What do you mean you're happy?" Robert said, getting agitated. "Mom, you're sitting on a gold mine and begging for change. Do you know how hard it is to start a successful business these days? Without a proper plan, this little hobby of yours will never amount to anything." "Robert," I said, putting down the jar in my hand, "I'm not doing this to build an empire." "Then why are you doing it?" he asked, completely baffled. I looked around my small yard. The sunlight glinted off the freshly washed glass jars, creating a rainbow of colors. The two women helping me were laughing as they chopped peppers. Doc Peterson's grandson had just dropped off a stack of newly designed labels. "Because it makes me happy," I said softly. Nicole scoffed. "See? I told you it was just a little hobby. How much money can you really make?" I ignored her condescending tone and went into the kitchen, returning with a few jars of a special sauce. "Leo, this is a kid-friendly version Grandma made for you. It's not spicy. Here, try it." Leo cheered and eagerly took the jar, opening it to eat a spoonful right away. Robert and Nicole stood by, their expressions shifting between frustration and greed. "Mom, just think about it," Robert said finally. "We're only trying to help you." I nodded but said nothing more. After they left, Doc Peterson came over. "Everything all right?" he asked with concern. "Everything's fine," I smiled. "In fact, everything is clearer than ever." The success at the market continued for 2 weeks, and my handmade sauces slowly gained a reputation in the surrounding towns. People started driving to the village just to buy from me, and even some tourists from the city came looking for my little workshop. "Helen, you can't keep up with the demand," the town clerk said one day. "I've got orders from 2 farm-to-table restaurants in the county. They each want 50 jars of every flavor. Can you handle that?" I did a quick calculation of my manpower and supplies. Right now, the most we can make is 200 jars a day, and that's just to supply the market. "Then hire more people," the clerk exclaimed. "There are so many women in the village looking for work. You teach them, pay them a daily wage, and they'll be thrilled." Doc Peterson agreed. "Helen, this is a real opportunity. You can't do it all by yourself. It's time to make this official." With everyone's encouragement, I rented the old, abandoned granary at the edge of the village and, after some basic renovations, turned it into a proper workshop. 5 local women applied for jobs, and I taught them the process step by step. The first official batch of Helen's homestead sauces was produced. We improved the packaging and used the professional-looking labels designed by Doc Peterson's grandson. The town clerk helped connect me with several specialty food stores and restaurants in the county, and suddenly, my sales channels opened up. "Ma'am, this sauce would sell like crazy online," one of the restaurant owners suggested. "My niece runs a small online business. I could introduce you." "Online?" He hesitated. "I don't know anything about that." "It's easy," he said enthusiastically. "You take a few pictures, write a short description, and she posts it on her social media. When someone orders, you just ship it to them." On a whim, I agreed to try. 3 days later, the young woman called me, ecstatic. The first batch had sold out completely, and she needed another 100 jars. "Ma'am, you really need to trademark your brand," she said. "A product this good needs to be protected." A trademark? A brand? These concepts felt so foreign to me. I consulted with Doc Peterson, and it turned out his son knew a firm in the county that handled business registrations. "Helen, I think we should develop some new product lines," Doc Peterson suggested. "What about a series of wellness sauces? We could add some healthy, traditional herbs. City people are really into that sort of thing now." We were instantly on the same page. He would provide the herbal formulas, and I would perfect the flavors. After many trials, the Helen's Homestead Wellness line was born, featuring 5 new flavors, including goji berry and date, and a savory yam and ginseng sauce. Just as my business was taking off, Robert called again. "Mom, I heard your business is getting bigger." His tone was much more subdued this time. "Why didn't you tell me? I could help you." "I have enough help from the people in the village," I replied softly. "It's not the same. You can't trust outsiders the way you can trust family," Robert said urgently. Nicole and I were talking, and we're going to come down for a few days this weekend with Leo to help you figure out how to scale up. I had a feeling I knew what he was really after, but I didn't call him on it. Do as you wish, I said. That weekend, Robert's family arrived, laden with gifts. Leo ran straight to the workshop, excited to see how the sauce was made. Even Nicole managed a smile. Wow, you've really cleaned this place up, she said, looking around with surprise. It's much more professional than I imagined. Robert got straight to the point. Mom, I spoke with the head buyer at the county supermarket. They're willing to stock your sauces, but we need to sign a formal contract, which means you need a business license and all that. Robert, I said, putting down my work. I'm happy with the way things are. I don't want to get any bigger. What do you mean you don't want to get bigger? Robert snapped. Mom, do you know how important a supermarket contract is? With that platform, your sauce could be sold across the entire state, maybe even nationally. Our sauce? I repeated the word softly. Robert seemed to realize his slip of the tongue and quickly corrected himself. I mean your sauce. Mom, I'm just trying to help you. You're at an age where you shouldn't be stressing over all this. Let me handle the business side of things. You just focus on the recipes. Nicole chimed in. He's right. Robert knows so many people. It's much better than you fumbling around in this little village. I didn't answer, just continued with my bottling. Seeing that I wasn't budging, Robert's tone changed. Mom, is it that you don't trust me? I'm your son. Robert, I said, looking up and meeting his gaze. Do you know why I came back here? He stared at me, dumbfounded. Because for those 10 years I lived with you, I didn't feel like a person. Here, I said calmly. I've found my worth. Robert's face contorted with a series of emotions, finally settling on frustration. You're being unreasonable, he muttered, grabbing Nicole and Leo. Let's go. As he left, Leo secretly pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. I opened it later to find a childish scrawl, Grandma's sauce is the best. I clutched the note, my heart a mixture of warmth and sorrow. After that incident, I focused even more on my work. With the town clerk's help, I officially registered Helen's homestead as a sole proprietorship and obtained a food production license. Doc Peterson's grandson set up an online store for me, and sales continued to climb. A month later, I received my first major purchase order. A chain of supermarkets in the county wanted 500 jars of assorted flavors. As I signed the contract, my hand was shaking so badly I could hardly hold the pen. Well, Helen, looks like you're about to be rich, the purchasing manager joked. I shook my head. I'm not looking to get rich. I just want to make a product that's worthy of the people who buy it. That night, I sat alone in my yard, looking up at the star-filled sky, my mind racing. From being the unwanted freeloader in my son's home to becoming a successful small business owner, the transformation of the past few months felt like a dream. My phone buzzed with a text message from Nicole. I heard you got the supermarket contract. Robert said to let you know if you need any help. Just ask. I didn't reply. I just set the phone down gently. A soft breeze drifted in, carrying the sweet scent of the distant fields. I knew without a doubt that I had made the right choice. The new wooden sign for Helen's homestead gleamed in the afternoon Sunday. I stood in front of the newly renovated workshop, watching the workers move in and out, carrying new equipment, and a feeling of indescribable satisfaction washed over me. 3 months ago, this was just the village's abandoned old granary. Now, after some renovations, it was a respectable, small-scale food production facility. It couldn't compare to the large factories in the city, but it had everything it needed. A sterilization room, a raw materials processing area, a bottling station, and a packaging section. It was small, but it was complete. Helen, the people from the county TV station are here. The town clerk's young daughter ran over to tell me, her cheeks flushed with excitement. I quickly smoothed my apron and wiped my hands. Ever since the supermarket contract had been successfully fulfilled, my sauces had become quite well known in the county. Last week, the town clerk had cryptically told me he had a surprise for me. It turned out he had contacted the local television station to do a story on me. Helen, it's an honor to finally meet you, a young female reporter said, shaking my hand warmly. We're from the Rural Revitalization in Action program, and we'd like to interview you as a model for senior entrepreneurship. I stood there awkwardly, my face flushing red. Oh, there's nothing special to interview me about. You're being too modest, the reporter smiled. Starting a successful business in your 60s, with a product that's become so popular, you're exactly the kind of story we're looking for. For the next 2 hours, I gave them a tour of the workshop, explained the production process, and even did a live demonstration of how to make my signature chili sauce. I was clumsy and nervous in front of the camera, but when I started talking about making the sauces, the words came naturally. Helen, what made you decide to start this business? The reporter asked as they were wrapping up. I was silent for a moment, then decided to tell the truth. After I moved back from my son's house, I needed something to do. It just so happened that this was a skill I had from my younger days. And is your son supportive of your business? The reporter pressed. The question was like a small pinprick to my heart. I forced a smile. He's very busy with his own career. The television crew had barely left when my phone rang. It was Robert. Mom, you were on TV. Why didn't you tell me? His voice was filled with an enthusiasm I hadn't heard in a long time. A friend of mine just called and said he saw you on the local news. It was just a small interview, I said quietly. A small interview? Mom, do you know what this means? Robert said excitedly. This is free advertising. Your sauces are going to be famous. I didn't know how to respond, so I just mumbled non-committally as he went on and on about helping me expand, register a trademark, and develop new markets, as if he had completely forgotten our last unpleasant encounter. After I hung up, Doc Peterson walked over, holding a copy of the local newspaper. Helen, look at this. On the third page was a large photo of me, with the headline, 68-year-old returns to her roots, revives traditional craft. I took the paper in astonishment, my fingers trembling. Well, you're a local celebrity now, Doc Peterson said with a proud smile. The news spread faster than I could have imagined. That afternoon, a distributor from the next county called to place a large order. That evening, the town clerk excitedly told me that the county was designating my workshop as a model project for rural revitalization and would be providing policy support. It was all happening so fast, I could hardly believe it was real. That night, I tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. I finally got up and went over my account books. Looking at the steady growth in income over the past few months, a long-forgotten sense of pride swelled within me. However, the good times did not last. 3 days later, I was in the workshop instructing a new employee when I heard a commotion outside. Helen, bad news. The town clerk ran in, looking panicked. The health department is here. They said they're here for an inspection. My heart clenched. I hurried outside to meet them. 3 people in official uniforms stood in the yard, their expressions grim. Are you Miss Helen? The man in the lead asked, showing me his badge. We received a complaint alleging unsanitary conditions at your facility. We need to conduct an inspection. Over the next 2 hours, my heart sank lower and lower. The inspectors went over every inch of the workshop, taking meticulous notes, improper storage of raw materials, inadequate sterilization equipment, incomplete health certificates for employees. They were all minor issues, but they were enough for them to issue a formal notice of correction. According to regulations, your facility must suspend production immediately. Operations can only resume after you have rectified these issues, and we have conducted a follow-up inspection, the lead inspector announced. I stood there, stunned, as they placed a seal on my workshop door. My mind was completely blank. The workers looked at me, bewildered. The town clerk pleaded with the inspectors, but it was no use. Helen, don't worry too much. The town clerk comforted me after the inspectors left. These are all small things. We can fix them. I nodded mechanically, but I couldn't help wondering, who would have reported me? The answer came that evening in a text message from Nicole. Her smugness was palpable even through the screen. Heard your workshop got shut down. I told you those little homemade operations are never up to code. It was bound to happen sooner or later. You should just let Robert take over and run it properly. I stared at the phone screen, my fingers turning to ice. So that was it. When Doc Peterson heard the news and rushed over, I was still sitting on the steps of the sealed workshop, staring into space. "Helen, don't take it so hard," he said softly, sitting down beside me. "It's common for food businesses to get inspected. Just fix the problems and you'll be fine." "It was Nicole," she reported me, I said in a low voice. Doc Peterson was silent for a moment. "Do you have proof?" I shook my head and just showed him the text message. He read it and sighed. "That woman has a heart of stone. I should have seen it coming," I said with a bitter smile. Robert was suddenly so enthusiastic after he saw the news report. "I should have been more suspicious. What are you going to do now?" Doc Peterson asked. I stood up and brushed the dust off my pants. "We'll fix it. The issues they pointed out are real, so we'll fix them." For the next week, I worked tirelessly to address every single issue on the list. I bought new sterilization equipment, redesigned the raw materials storage area, and arranged for all my employees to get physicals and obtain their health certificates. Doc Peterson helped me get in touch with a food safety expert from the county to guide me through the process. A week later, the health department returned, conducted their inspection, and finally removed the seal. But the week-long shutdown had created a backlog of orders, and some customers had already canceled. Just as I was scrambling to get back on track, Robert and his family showed up unannounced. This time, they didn't even bother with pleasantries. "Mom, see? You can't run a business without proper management," Robert said as soon as he walked in. "Just sign over the recipes and the trademark to me. I'll register a proper corporation, and you can be a technical consultant. You'll get a share of the profits. Isn't that better?" I looked at the greed in his eyes, and my heart felt like it was being squeezed. This was the son I had raised. "Robert, this is my business," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you mean, your business?" Robert's voice rose. "You're too old for this. Just hand over the recipes, and I'll take care of you in your old age." Nicole chimed in. "He's right. Robert is doing this for your own good. If it weren't for our connections, you would have gotten a much bigger fine this time." I finally understood their plan. First, they reported me to create a crisis. Then they swooped in, pretending to be saviors, to seize control of my recipes and my brand. The coldness of their betrayal was eclipsed only by a profound sadness. "Leave," I said, turning and walking back into the house, unwilling to say another word. "Mom!" Robert grabbed my arm. "Don't be so ungrateful. I'm telling you, if you don't cooperate, I have ways to make sure you can't continue this business." I shook his hand off and looked him straight in the eye. "Robert, I am your mother." The words seemed to strike a chord in him. He faltered, his aggressive posture softening for a moment. Nicole saw her chance and pulled him toward the door. "Fine, let her think it over." After they left, I sat in the living room, staring at the old photograph of my late husband on the wall, and the tears finally came. "Oh, Frank," I whispered, "what happened to our son?" Getting back to work was not easy. Although the workshop was open again, some customers had already found other suppliers. Worse, vicious rumors began to circulate in the village. "Did you hear? Helen's sauce made someone sick. No wonder she got shut down. It must be unsanitary. She's so old. Why can't she just stay home and relax instead of causing all this trouble?" The words were like invisible knives, stabbing me over and over. Doc Peterson told me the rumors were likely started by Nicole, but I no longer had the energy to investigate. The relentless work and emotional blows had taken their toll. My body finally gave out. That morning, I had just arrived at the workshop when I felt a sharp, crushing pain in my chest. My vision went black, and I collapsed. "Helen!" Doc Peterson's frantic shout was the last thing I heard before I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed in the county medical center. Doc Peterson was sitting by my side. Seeing that I was awake, he immediately pressed the call button for the nurse. "You're finally awake," he said, breathing a sigh of relief. "You scared me to death." The doctor came in and explained that I had suffered from an acute cardiac event. I would need to stay in the hospital for a few days for observation. This was brought on by a combination of long-term exhaustion and extreme emotional stress, the doctor said sternly. "You must rest. No more stress." I nodded, but my mind was already on the workshop and the pile of unfilled orders. Doc Peterson saw the worry in my eyes. "Don't worry about a thing," he said. I've already asked the town clerk to oversee the workshop. They'll fill what orders they can, and I'll call the other customers to explain the delay. Thank you, I said gratefully. Don't be silly, he smiled. By the way, should I call Robert? I hesitated, then shook my head. Not yet. The days in the hospital were long and tedious. Doc Peterson visited every day, bringing news from the village and updates on the workshop. On the third afternoon, as I was looking over the account books he had brought, I heard hurried footsteps in the hallway. Mom? I looked up to see Robert, with Leo trailing behind him. Nicole was not with them. How did you? I started, surprised. Leo missed you and insisted I bring him, Robert said, looking uncomfortable. I called the village and they told me you were in the hospital. Leo rushed to my bedside, his eyes red. Grandma, does it hurt? I stroked his head, a warmth spreading through my chest. No, sweetie. Grandma will be home soon. Robert stood by, watching us, his expression unreadable. After Leo had gone to the bathroom, he finally spoke. Mom, why do you have to push yourself so hard? Just come home, we'll take care of you. I shook my head. I'm happy in the village. Happy? You worked yourself into the hospital, Robert said, his voice rising with emotion. Do you know what people in the village are saying about me? That I'm a terrible son who lets his elderly mother work herself to the bone. So, it was still about his pride. I gave a small, bitter smile and said nothing. Robert paced the room for a few moments, then suddenly stopped. Mom, do you hate me? The question stunned me. Hate my own son? The thought had never crossed my mind. No, I said softly. I don't hate you. I'm just disappointed. Robert's face froze. It was clearly not the answer he was expecting. He opened his mouth to say something, but a nurse came in. Visiting hours are over. The patient needs to rest. Robert had no choice but to leave with Leo. As they walked out, Leo kept looking back at me, his eyes full of reluctance, and my heart ached. After they left, Doc Peterson came by with some good news. The provincial television station had seen the county news report and wanted to do a feature story on me. Helen, this is a huge opportunity, he said excitedly. A provincial broadcast has a much wider reach. Your sauce is really going to take off. But I couldn't feel any joy. Doc, I'm scared. Scared of what? I'm scared of what Robert and Nicole will do when they see it, I whispered. Doc Peterson was silent for a moment, then he gently took my hand. Helen, you can't live your life in fear. This is your business, your life. You have the right to be happy. His words brought a sting to my eyes. He was right. For most of my life, I had lived for others, for my husband, for my son, for my grandson. When had I ever lived for myself? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat up, and taking a pen and paper from the bedside table, began to write. First, I wrote a will, laying out a simple distribution of my assets. Then, I wrote a business plan for the workshop, including new recipes I wanted to try and ideas for expansion. Finally, I wrote a letter to Robert, pouring out all the things I had kept locked in my heart for years. When I was finished, I let out a long, slow breath, as if a great weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The next day, the doctor told me I could be discharged, but I had to take it easy. When Doc Peterson came to pick me up, he had some surprising news. Robert came to the village yesterday. He toured your workshop and had a long talk with the town clerk. What did he want? I asked, suddenly wary. I'm not sure, he said. But the clerk said his whole attitude has changed. He asked a lot of questions about how you started the business. I frowned, wondering what Robert was up to now. When I got back to the village, I found the workshop running smoothly. The workers were all happy to see me and eagerly filled me in on the past few days. Your son came by, one of them said. He watched our whole production process. He even tasted all the products and said they were better than he remembered. The strangest thing was, he asked to see the account book. The account book? My heart skipped a beat. The ledger where I had recorded 10 years of my family's expenses. After I returned to the village, I had kept it in a drawer at the workshop to track my business finances. What did Robert want with that? That evening, as I was organizing the medications I had brought home from the hospital, there was a knock on the door. It was Robert, and in his hand was a familiar notebook, my family ledger. "Mom, can I come in?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I stepped aside to let him in, my heart pounding with uncertainty. Robert sat down in the living room and placed the ledger on the table, saying nothing for a long time. "I read the whole thing," he finally said, his fingers gently tracing the worn cover. I waited. 10 years. For 10 whole years, you wrote down every single penny, he said, looking up, his eyes red. I thought you were just living off us, a freeloader." His voice broke. I opened it to this page. "Look, $3,000 for Leo's after-school program. And here, $487 to cover the shortfall in the HOA fees. And this, groceries, household supplies. You spent your entire pension on us." Seeing my son completely broken, my heart ached with a mixture of pain and relief. He finally understood. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Robert asked, his voice filled with anguish. "What good would it have done?" I said softly. "You and Nicole were already struggling." Suddenly, Robert fell to his knees, grabbing my legs and sobbing. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm not a man. I'm a monster." I stroked his hair, just as I had when he was a little boy, as my own silent tears fell. This was the moment I had been waiting for so long. Robert stayed for 2 days, and it was the most time my son and I had spent together in peace in over a decade. He helped me clean the yard, organize the workshop's finances, and even learned how to do some of the simpler packing tasks. "Mom, you rest. I'll do this," he would say, his eyes full of a desperate need to make amends. I didn't ask why Nicole hadn't come, and he didn't mention her. It wasn't until the second evening, as we sat in the yard enjoying the cool breeze, that Robert brought her up. "Nicole." "She doesn't understand," he said, choosing his words carefully. She thinks old people should just stay home and be taken care of, not go out and start businesses." I smiled but said nothing. Nicole didn't not understand. She looked down on my little workshop and was jealous that I had found a life of my own. "Mom, when is the provincial TV station coming for the interview?" Robert asked suddenly. "Next Wednesday," I answered, then looked at him warily. "Why do you ask?" No, don't get the wrong idea," Robert said quickly, holding up his hands. "I was just thinking, if you don't mind, I'd like to stay and help. You know, with the cameras and everything, you'll need someone to lend a hand." I was skeptical, but seeing the sincerity in his eyes, I nodded. 3 days after Robert left, a vicious rumor started spreading through the village. People were saying that Doc Peterson and I were having an affair, that he had given me the money to start my business, and that our partnership was just a front for something illicit. When the words reached my ears, I was in the workshop, teaching a new employee. For a moment, I felt like I had been struck by lightning, frozen to the spot. "Helen, don't listen to that nonsense." Doc Peterson rushed over, his face pale with anger. "My son is already looking into who started this." I forced myself to continue working, but I already knew who was behind it. Sure enough, that evening Robert called. His tone was strange. "Mom, are those rumors in the village? Are they true?" "What do you think?" I asked, my heart sinking. "Of course I don't believe it, but you and Doc Peterson have been spending a lot of time together." "Robert?" I cut him off. "Doc Peterson has been my neighbor for decades. He was your father's friend. And right now, he is the only person who has genuinely tried to help me." There was a silence on the other end. Then Robert said in a low voice, "Nicole, she said she saw you two together." "When did she see us?" I scoffed. "She's been to this village a handful of times in her life." Robert had no answer. After I hung up, I sat in the living room, staring at the photo of my late husband on the wall, my heart in agony. The rumors didn't just hurt me. They dishonored the pure friendship between me and Doc Peterson, and they insulted the memory of my husband. The next morning, I noticed that Doc Peterson didn't come by at his usual time to help me move supplies. At noon, I went to his house, but his son politely turned me away at the door. "Ma'am, my dad thinks it's best if we keep some distance for now." I stood at his gate, still holding the jar of pickles I had made for him, feeling as if a heavy stone had been placed on my chest. Even Doc Peterson was backing away. The power of these rumors was devastating. In the days that followed, I managed the workshop on my own. The way the villagers looked at me had changed. Some of the women even stopped coming to work. The orders were still there, but I was short-staffed and had to work late into the night. But the most painful blow came from Leo. That weekend, Robert brought him to visit. The boy, who was usually so affectionate, hid behind his father and wouldn't come near me. "Grandma, they said you're not a good woman," Leo whispered. The words pierced my heart. I looked at Robert, but he avoided my gaze. "Leo," I knelt down, fighting back tears. "Grandma loves you. I will always be your good grandma." The boy nodded, as if he understood, but he still wouldn't rush into my arms like he used to. After they left, I sat on my doorstep, looking at the empty yard, and for the first time, I began to doubt myself. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe an old woman should just stay put and not stir up trouble. Was this little business worth losing the love of my grandson? Just as I was sinking into despair, the town clerk came running. "Helen, the provincial TV station just called. They said they're arriving tomorrow morning. We need to get ready." I tried to rally my spirits, organizing the remaining workers to clean the workshop and prepare the products for display. But the enthusiasm I once had was gone. I even considered canceling the interview. That night, as I was double-checking the ingredients for the next day, I heard the yard gate creak open. I looked up and saw Leo. He had snuck out and run all the way here by himself, and he was clutching something in his arms. "Grandma," he whispered, his eyes red as if he had been crying. "Leo, what are you?" I rushed over to him. "Mommy and Daddy were fighting," he said, pulling a phone from under his shirt. He played a recording. Nicole's shrill voice was crystal clear. "Of course I spread those rumors. Otherwise, your mother would really start thinking she's something special. An old woman like that, she should be ashamed." Then, Robert's voice, full of rage. "You've gone too far. That's my mother." "Huh. Who knows if she's even your real mother? A country bumpkin like that." There was the sharp sound of a slap, followed by Nicole's shriek and Robert's roar. "Get out! Get the hell out of my house!" The recording ended. Leo looked up at me, his eyes brimming with tears. "Grandma, Mommy is a bad person. I shouldn't have believed her." I pulled my grandson into a tight hug, my own tears finally breaking free. So that was it. It had been Nicole all along. And Robert. Robert had finally chosen my side. "Leo, how about you sleep at Grandma's house tonight?" I asked softly, wiping away my tears. The boy nodded vigorously, his small hand clutching my shirt as if he was afraid I would disappear. I kissed his forehead, my mind made up. The next morning, the provincial TV crew arrived on schedule. I put on my best dress, left Leo in the care of the town clerk's wife, and walked calmly toward the waiting cameras. "Helen, we hear you've faced quite a few challenges on your entrepreneurial journey," the reporter began. I looked straight into the camera and told my story calmly and truthfully. How I left my son's house, how I rediscovered my craft, how I faced false accusations and vicious rumors. I didn't hide anything, didn't exaggerate. It was as if I were telling someone else's story. "Finally," I said, a small smile on my face, "I want to say this to all the seniors out there like me. Age is not a reason to give up. As long as you have passion in your heart, it's never too late to start." The interview had just concluded when Robert arrived. His eyes were red and swollen. He clearly hadn't slept all night. "Mom, Nicole and we're getting a divorce," he said without preamble. I sighed. I wasn't surprised. "It's not just because of the rumors," he said, shaking his head. "For 10 years, I watched how she treated you, and I pretended not to see. It wasn't until I read your ledger and heard what she said on that recording that I finally realized what a terrible person I've been." I patted my son's shoulder, not knowing what to say. "Mom, I want to move back here and help you run the workshop," Robert said suddenly. "That is, if you can forgive me." I looked into my son's sincere eyes and nodded. No matter what, he was still my child. After the provincial news report aired, the fame of Helen's homestead exploded. Orders flooded in like an avalanche. The phone rang from morning till night. Even major supermarket chains from the state capital were calling to place orders. Robert quit his job in the city and moved back to the village to help me. His college degree was in marketing, which perfectly complemented my skills. We redesigned the packaging, established a customer database, and launched a full-fledged online store. "Mom, we need to expand," Robert said excitedly. "Our orders are 3 times our production capacity." I nodded, but I still had reservations. The village gossip had died down, but it hadn't disappeared completely, and Doc Peterson was still deliberately avoiding me, which left a dull ache in my heart. "Robert, I need to talk to Doc Peterson first," I told my son one evening. Robert's face fell. "Mom, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have believed Nicole's lies. I'll go and apologize to him." "No," I said. "I'll go myself." The next morning, I took a freshly made jar of pickles and went to Doc Peterson's house. This time, his son didn't stop me, though his expression was complicated. Doc Peterson was in his yard, drying herbs. When he saw me, his hand trembled, and he nearly dropped his basket. "Helen," he stammered, his face turning beet red. "Doc, it's been a while," I said calmly, walking over and placing the pickles on the stone table. "This is your favorite mushroom pickle. I just made it." Doc Peterson stood there awkwardly, like a child who had been caught doing something wrong. I looked at his white hair and stooped back, and my heart softened. "I know it was Nicole who spread those rumors," I said, getting straight to the point. "Robert is divorcing her." Doc Peterson's head shot up. "Divorcing? Because of us?" "Not entirely," I shook my head. "Mostly because Robert finally saw her for who she truly is." "Well, then," Doc Peterson stammered, his eyes darting around. "Doc," I took a deep breath. "How many years have we known each other?" 40-something years, I suppose," he answered in a low voice. 40 years of friendship," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "And you're going to let a few rumors ruin it?" "I'm not afraid." "Why are you?" Doc Peterson's face grew even redder. After a long pause, he finally mumbled, "I was afraid of dragging you down." "I'm not afraid of being dragged down," my voice rose. "Doc, without your help these past few months, the workshop would have failed. You are my most important friend." I hesitated on the last word. In my heart, Doc Peterson had become more than just a friend. After my husband passed, he was the one who quietly looked out for me. When I returned to the village, he was the first to lend a hand. When my workshop was shut down, he was the one who saw me through the crisis. Doc Peterson seemed to catch the meaning behind my words. His eyes lit up. "Helen, are you saying?" Just then, a loud clap of thunder echoed across the sky, and fat raindrops began to fall. We scrambled to gather the herbs from the yard, the serious atmosphere vanishing in an instant. "Come inside," Doc Peterson shouted over the growing storm. I shook my head. "No, it's getting dark. I still have some things to secure at the workshop. I need to get back." As I ran home through the downpour, my heart felt lighter than it had in a long time. The conversation wasn't finished, but the ice was broken. The storm passed as quickly as it had arrived, but a much greater test was yet to come. That evening, the sky darkened again. My son and I were working late at the workshop when we heard the town clerk shouting, "Helen, the river is rising." We rushed outside to see that the small river behind the village had overflowed its banks. Murky floodwaters were surging toward the village, and my workshop, located in a low-lying area, was directly in its path. "The inventory! We have to move the inventory!" I screamed, running toward the warehouse. Robert and a few workers followed, frantically carrying out boxes of finished sauces. The rain was coming down in sheets now, and water was already seeping into the warehouse, rising past our ankles. "Mom, it's too late. We have to get out," Robert yelled, pulling me toward the door. "No, there's still half of it left." I struggled against him, trying to pack more boxes. Just then, with a deafening crash, the wind tore a hole in the warehouse roof. Rain poured in, and a moment later, a wall of water burst through the back wall, instantly flooding the room up to our knees. "Mom, let's go." Robert dragged me out by force. We had just reached higher ground when the entire warehouse collapsed with a thunderous roar. Years of hard work, gone in an instant. I stood in the pouring rain, soaked to the bone, watching the wreckage in a daze. It felt like a nightmare. "Mom?" Robert's worried voice brought me back. A sharp pain suddenly shot through my chest. My vision went black, and I collapsed into my son's arms. In the haze, I could hear Robert's desperate cries, feel hands lifting me, and smell the antiseptic scent of a hospital. But the clearest thing was a voice in my head, repeating over and over, "It's over. Everything is over." I don't know how much time had passed. I slowly opened my eyes to find myself in a hospital bed again. Robert was slumped in a chair beside me, asleep. Outside, the rain was still falling, but it was a gentle drizzle now. I shifted slightly, and Robert woke up with a start. "Mom, you're awake. How's the workshop?" I asked, my voice a dry rasp. Robert lowered his head. "The warehouse is completely gone. But the main building is still standing. We managed to save most of the equipment." I closed my eyes, tears streaming down my temples. All my hard work, washed away. "Mom, don't be too upset," Robert said, taking my hand. "We can rebuild." "Rebuild?" I let out a bitter laugh. "With what? Where am I going to find the money, the energy? I'm an old woman." "I have the money," a familiar voice said from the doorway. I looked up to see Doc Peterson holding a cloth bag. "Doc?" Robert said, surprised. Doc Peterson walked to my bedside and handed me the bag. "Helen, this is my life savings, $200,000. It's yours." I stared at him, shocked. "I can't take this." "Why not?" he said, stubbornly placing the bag in my hands. "Consider it an investment. Your business has so much potential. I'm not worried about losing it." I looked at his sincere, earnest face, and I couldn't hold back the tears any longer. I sobbed, not just for the money, but for all the kindness he had shown me over the years. Doc Peterson stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to do, as Robert quietly slipped out of the room. "Helen, please don't cry," Doc Peterson said, clumsily patting my shoulder. "These things happen. The important thing is that you're safe." "Thank you," I choked out. "Don't say another word," he said, his own face flushing. "Just focus on getting better. The whole village is waiting for your sauce." I managed a tearful smile. With people like this by my side, no challenge seemed insurmountable. The day I was discharged from the hospital, the sun was shining brightly, as if the storm had never happened. Robert and Doc Peterson came to pick me up together, chatting and laughing like old friends. When we got back to the village, I was stunned by the sight before me. More than 20 villagers were gathered in front of my workshop, some clearing debris, some carrying new building materials, some painting the walls. "What is this?" I asked, looking at Robert in disbelief. "The whole village is here to help," Robert said proudly. "The town clerk organized a Rebuild Helen's Homestead campaign. People even came from the next village over. And those women you helped out," Doc Peterson added, "they all came with their families. The provincial TV station also reported on what happened, and the county has approved special disaster relief funds for you." I stood there, watching the bustling scene of reconstruction, tears welling up in my eyes once again. These simple, kind-hearted people were showing their support in the most direct way possible. "Helen, you're back." The town clerk spotted me and ran over. "Don't you worry. We'll have this workshop better than new in a week, guaranteed." "Thank you. Thank you all so much," I sobbed, unable to say more. In the days that followed, though I was forced to rest, I was not idle. Robert and Doc Peterson helped me redesign the workshop layout, while I began developing new product recipes. The flood, though devastating, had given me a chance to start fresh. I decided I would no longer run a small-time operation. I would build a proper, modern food processing plant. A month later, the brand-new Helen's Homestead Food Company was officially opened. The county officials, the provincial TV crew, and villagers from all around came for the opening ceremony. It was a joyous celebration. "Helen, would you like to share some words of wisdom about your entrepreneurial journey?" the reporter asked, holding the microphone out to me. I looked at the familiar faces in the crowd. Doc Peterson, who had always supported me, my son Robert, who had found his way back, my lovely grandson Leo, and all the villagers who had worked alongside me. "I don't have much wisdom to share," I said with a smile. "I just believe that in this life, it's never too late to start over. The most important thing is to have the courage to change, the perseverance to keep going, and to have people who truly care about you by your side." The crowd erupted in applause. Doc Peterson stood in the front row, his eyes glistening with tears. Robert held Leo in his arms, his face beaming with pride. After the ceremony, I announced that I would be donating 10% of the factory's profits to establish a rural senior entrepreneurship fund to help other seniors like me realize their dreams. The decision surprised everyone, even Robert. As I looked at their astonished and admiring faces, I felt a deep sense of peace. Money was important, but being able to pass on this hope to others was the true measure of a happy life. That evening, the three of us, me, Robert, and Leo, sat in the yard enjoying the cool air. Leo was once again my shadow, and was now curled up on my lap, begging for a story. "Mom," Robert said suddenly, "Nicole wants to see Leo." My hand, which was stroking my grandson's hair, paused. "What do you think?" "I think they should see each other," Robert said carefully. "After all, she is his mother." I nodded. "You decide. Just make sure Leo is okay." "Grandma, I don't want to see Mommy," Leo piped up, his eyes filling with tears. "She said bad things about you." I hugged my grandson tightly. "Leo, Mommy may have made mistakes, but she loves you, just like Grandma will always love you." Leo nodded, not fully understanding, and snuggled closer. Robert looked at me with gratitude and quietly wiped a tear from his own eye. Late that night, after tucking Leo into bed, I sat alone in the yard for a while. Doc Peterson appeared at the gate, carrying a small bottle. "Not asleep yet?" he asked softly. "Couldn't sleep," I smiled, motioning for him to sit. "What's that?" "Herbal wine," he said, holding up the bottle. "I made it myself. It helps with sleep." I poured him a cup of tea, and we sat in comfortable silence, enjoying the quiet moment. "Helen," Doc Peterson said suddenly, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you for a long time." My heart began to beat a little faster. "What is it?" "Well, you see, we're both at our age," he stammered, his hands nervously rubbing his knees. "I was just wondering if you wouldn't mind." "Doc," I couldn't help but smile. "Just say what you want to say." He took a deep breath, and then, from his pocket, he pulled out a small box. "Helen, I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He opened the box. Inside was a pair of simple gold rings. I was stunned. I never expected him to be so direct. I know this is sudden," Doc Peterson said, tripping over his words. "You can take some time to think about it." "I don't need to think about it," I said softly, holding out my hand. "Put it on." Doc Peterson's hands were shaking so much that it took him 3 tries to get the ring on my finger. Then I took the other ring and slid it firmly onto his. There were no flowery vows, no grand romantic gesture. Just 2 old souls, weathered by a lifetime of storms, promising to face the rest of their days together under the stars. A year later, the products from Helen's Homestead Food Company were being sold all across the state and had even been featured on a national agricultural program. Doc Peterson and I got married, a simple affair with just a few tables of family and friends. Robert had taken over the sales department at the factory and was thriving. Leo was attending the village elementary school, and on weekends he would follow his grandpa Doc around, learning about herbs. As for Nicole, she and Robert had a co-parenting agreement, and she would occasionally come to pick up Leo for a weekend in the city. I heard that after seeing my success on television, she was filled with regret, but it was too late. It was spring again. I stood at the factory entrance, watching a new shipment of our products being loaded onto a truck, my heart full. From being the unwanted freeloader in my son's home to having my own business and my own family, the journey had been filled with tears and laughter, loss and gain. "Grandma, Grandpa Doc says it's time to come home for dinner." Leo came bouncing over, taking my hand. "All right, I'm coming," I said, stroking my grandson's head. I looked up and saw Doc Peterson and Robert waiting for us a short distance away, and a warmth spread through me. Life, I thought, is a lot like my handmade sauce. It needs to be crushed, fermented, and given time to settle before it can release its richest, most profound flavor. And I, finally, in the autumn of my life, was tasting the sweetness that was all my own.